You know, they say pediophobia, the fear of dolls. It's a pretty common thing. Blank, lifeless stares, cracked porcelain faces, stiff, unnatural limbs. For some, dolls are comforting, a throwback to childhood. But for others, pure nightmare fuel. Now picture this, an entire island, not just with dolls, but absolutely covered in them. Thousands of them. Mutilated, decayed, and eerily suspended from every available surface, left to the mercy of the elements. This is La Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls, tucked away deep in the ancient canals of Xochimilco, just south of Mexico City. A place born from tragedy, nurtured by obsession, and shrouded in a chilling legend that has captivated and terrified for decades. But tonight, we're not just going over the spooky stories you might have heard. We're diving right into the heart of this creepy enigma to find out what really happened. What truly went down on this lonely patch of land? Who was Don Julián Santana Barrera, the guy behind this ghoulish collection? And with dark tourism booming and legends always changing, what's the real deal with visiting the island of the dolls today? Because some whispers suggest the island itself has become as hard to find, and maybe as haunted, as the spirits said to roam its shores. Picture it. For over 50 years, one man, supposedly driven by the story of a drowned girl, turns a remote island into this grotesque shrine. He collects dolls, hundreds, then thousands, from canals and trash heaps, hanging their decaying forms from trees as silent, watchful guardians. He wasn't aiming for a tourist spot. Fame wasn't his goal. By all accounts, he was trying to calm a restless spirit, or maybe, just maybe, his own troubled mind. But what if the creepiest part of this whole thing isn't just the dolls, or even the tragic death of the man who collected them? What if the real twist is that the island many knew is now reportedly closed off, its secrets possibly more hidden than ever, with stories circulating about fake islands tricking visitors? That's the mystery we're digging into tonight. Before we even think about setting foot on the creepy soil of the Isla de las Muñecas, we need to get to know its birthplace, Xochimilco. About 17 miles south of hectic Mexico City, Xochimilco feels like a place where time just flows differently, carried on ancient waters. This isn't just any canal system. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a living piece of the pre-Hispanic history of the Valley of Mexico. Imagine a vast lake system, dotted with artificial islands called chinampas, floating gardens, ingeniously created by the Aztecs centuries ago. These chinampas, these fertile plots built by layering mud and plants inside reed fences, were farming giants, feeding an empire with corn, beans, squash, tomatoes, chilies, and colorful flowers. The canals were their lifelines, crucial for trade and watering crops, a whole system supporting a unique way of life. Today, even though city growth has swallowed a lot of the original lake system, Xochimilco is still this vibrant, sometimes chaotic, echo of its past. The canals buzz with brightly painted gondola-style boats called trajineras, often decorated with names and fancy designs. On weekends, these waterways are packed with locals and tourists, creating a party-like, almost carnival vibe. Mariachi bands float by, serenading everyone, while vendors in canoes sell everything from roasted corn and micheladas to crafts and flowers. It's a celebration spot, a favorite getaway for people from Mexico City. But Xochimilco, meaning place where flowers grow, kind of has two sides to it. Get away from the main busy docks like Nuevo Nativitas, and the canals get quieter, more thoughtful, hinting at the deeper history and a sort of mysticism that hangs in the air. The chinampas, even with problems like urban growth and invasive plants, are still monuments to that ancient cleverness. And it's in this maze of water and floating islands, far from the noisy crowds, that you find the more isolated, more unsettling spots, like the original island of the dolls. The trip there, usually by trajinera, is an experience in itself, depending on where you start, like Embarcadero Cuemanco, which used to be the go-to for finding the real island. You could be looking at 1 to 2 hours each way, sometimes even a full 4-hour round trip. This journey takes you through quiet stretches, past working farms, tangled mangroves, and you might even spot some wildlife. Pelicans, kingfishers, egrets, and water snakes were pretty common sights. It's a slow ride, a real shift from the everyday world to one soaked in folklore and a kind of eerie beauty. But as we're about to find out, even this journey has become part of the island's unfolding mystery. At the core of the Island of the Dolls is a story, a haunting tale whispered and retold for decades, each version adding a new layer to its mystery. And it's a story completely tied to one man, Don Julián Santana Barrera. Sometime in the 1950s, Don Julián, who was from Xochimilco, made a huge life change. He left his wife and family and chose to live alone, isolating himself on a small, remote chinampa in the Tishuilo Lake area of the Xochimilco canals. Why he did this is pretty murky, lost to time and guesswork. Some say he just wanted peace to get away from it all. Others suggest he was already a troubled guy, maybe not entirely all there. Whatever his reasons, this island became his whole world, and he was its only caretaker. The most common version of the legend starts with a tragic discovery. Don Julián, all alone on his island, supposedly found the body of a young girl who'd drowned in the dark, murky canal waters around his chinampa. The details? About as murky as those waters. Some say she got tangled in water lilies. Others hint at something darker, more sinister. In some versions, Don Julián desperately tried to save her, but couldn't. This failure, this close call with death, is said to have really shaken him. Soon after this grim find, or so the story goes, something else floated by. A doll. Maybe it was bobbing in the same waters where the girl died. Convinced it belonged to her, Don Julián fished it out, as a sign of respect, maybe to calm her spirit or to keep any bad vibes away. He hung the doll from a tree. That one act, sparked by this chilling event, was the start of what turned into a lifelong, all-consuming obsession. But it seems the spirit wasn't easily calmed. Don Julián started experiencing creepy things. He reportedly heard whispers on the wind, a young girl's mournful cries, footsteps in the dark when he was alone. Some stories say he heard a voice, the girl's voice, sadly whispering, "I want my doll." He became convinced her spirit was haunting him, maybe punishing him for not saving her, or maybe just stuck to the place where she died. His crops started failing. Any peace he might have hoped for in his isolation was gone. Driven by this desperate need to soothe her restless spirit, or maybe to protect himself, Don Julián started collecting more dolls. If one wasn't enough, maybe more would work. And that's how the 50-year project began, transforming his little island into the chilling sight it became. He pulled them from the canals, fished them from the murky water. He searched trash heaps and dumps. He even supposedly traded the fruits and vegetables he grew on his chinampa for more dolls from the locals. He wasn't picky. He wasn't looking for perfect, beautiful dolls. In fact, some say he preferred the ugliest, most broken ones. Dolls already messed up, missing limbs, eyes gouged out, caked in mud. He didn't clean them, didn't try to fix them. He hung them up just as he found them, their decay almost reflecting the tragedy that started it all. Hundreds, then thousands of dolls ended up on the island, hanging from trees, nailed to his little wooden huts, scattered on the ground, some even buried or strung together like macabre decorations. Now, it's really important to get this. For Don Julián, this wasn't some art project or a tourist trap. He wasn't after attention or fame. In his own way, he saw these dolls as protectors, as friends for the lost girl, or maybe even as containers to trap any bad energy from her spirit. He lived among them, his tiny one-room hut also crammed with these silent, staring figures, some even wearing headdresses or sunglasses. He thought of them as beautiful protectors. And for years, long before it became this creepy tourist spot, he'd welcome the odd visitor, tell his story, sometimes charge a small fee for photos. This was his reality, his world, a bizarre little kingdom built from grief, fear, and a strange, unwavering devotion. The legend of Don Julián and the drowned girl is no doubt a great story, perfect for a place as naturally creepy as the Island of the Dolls. But like any legend passed down by word of mouth, jazzed up by time and imagination, the line between what's fact and what's folklore gets pretty blurry. To get to the real story, we have to look past the most sensational bits and see what we can actually find out about Don Julián Santana Barrera and how his chilling creation came to be. One of the biggest questions right off the bat is, did the drowned girl even exist? Don Julián always said this was why he started collecting dolls, but many people, including some of his own family, have their doubts. Some think that Don Julián may be already leaning towards a lonely and eccentric life, just imagined her. Was it a vivid hallucination? A result of his isolation and a mind wrestling with its own demons? Or was it a story that just grew over time? A way to explain an increasingly strange obsession? This uncertainty is a huge part of the island's mystery. If there was no drowned girl, then what really drove Don Julián to collect dolls for decades? His choice to leave his wife and kid in the 50s and hide away on the island? That's a documented fact. Cutting ties with normal life like that points to a deep need for isolation. Or maybe he was already detached. He lived like a hermit on this chinampa for over 50 years. A huge chunk of his life devoted to this one strange goal. This wasn't just a phase. It was a lifelong commitment. The doll collection itself? Undeniable. Thousands of them were there, and many still are. How he got them, pulling them from canals and trash, trading his produce, that's also consistently reported. It paints a picture of a man who was resourceful and pretty relentless. He wasn't just waiting for dolls to show up, he actively looked for them. The sheer number of dolls may be over 4,000 at its height, even landing a Guinness World Record for the largest collection of haunted dolls, really shows how intense his focus was. So, what was going on in Don Julián's head? It's impossible to diagnose someone after they're gone, but his actions suggest he wasn't exactly playing by the usual rules. His deep belief in the supernatural, his certainty that the dolls were protecting him or calming a spirit, and sticking to that for 50 years, it points to a very spiritual, or maybe very superstitious way of seeing the world. Some stories say that after finding the supposed drowned girl and the first doll, he claimed new dolls would just appear hanging in trees every time he went outside, some headless or missing limbs, as if an unseen hand put them there. When his crops failed, he took it as a sign the spirit was unhappy and tried even harder to get more dolls. Despite being a hermit, he wasn't totally cut off. He traded produce, chatted with locals, and later on, with curious visitors. He'd apparently show people around his creation, explaining why he did it. This suggests he wasn't trying to hide what he was doing. He actually seemed to want to share its story, or at least let people know it existed. Inside his main hut, people say you could see the very first doll he collected, and also his favorite, a doll named Agustina. There was even a small, casual museum area with newspaper clippings about the island and its unusual resident. The island's story also gets complicated by what different people who knew Don Julián or studied him thought. Some locals in Xochimilco saw him as eccentric but harmless. Others, maybe more superstitious, might have been a bit scared or wary of his island. In fact, some boat operators were apparently hesitant to take tourists there because of their own superstitions. Trying to find the real story also means sorting through all the myths that naturally build up around such a weird place. Tales of dolls moving their heads, their eyes following you, or whispering to each other at night. Those are common in the island's lore. And while they definitely amp up the creepy vibe and are a must-have for any ghost story, they were obviously hard to prove and often just the power of suggestion working overtime in a spooky place. From what people who talked to him reported, Don Julián always said the drowned girl was his main reason. Whether that was real, something he truly believed, or a story he made up, it was the story he lived by. He wasn't just a collector, he was a man performing a decades-long ritual, trying to handle forces he thought were real and powerful. His life on the island shows how powerful belief can be, and how it can shape reality, or at least your surroundings, in incredible and unsettling ways. So the true history here might be less about a provable ghost story, and more about the deep, lifelong, and very mysterious obsession of one lonely man. This story is definitely complex. Layers of folklore, personal tragedy, and some pretty unsettling truths. What are your first thoughts on why Don Julián did it? Do you buy the drowned girl legend? Or do you think there's another reason for his lifelong collection? Drop your theories and feelings in the comments below. And if you're finding this dive into the unknown as fascinating as we are, please hit that like button and subscribe for more trips into the world's most mysterious spots. Your support really helps us keep exploring these strange stories. For years, the Island of the Dolls was this notorious but still reachable dark tourism spot. People, pulled in by its chilling reputation and those creepy photos everyone saw online, would travel down the Xochimilco canals to see Don Julián's creation for themselves. Getting to the island was, by all accounts, a one-of-a-kind experience. Stepping onto its land meant walking into a world just overwhelmed by these silent, decaying figures. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of dolls in every imaginable state of decay greeted anyone who made the trip. They hung from almost every tree, their plastic or porcelain faces cracked and dirty, hair matted, limbs missing or twisted. Some were nailed to the sides of the 3 small huts on the island, including the one-room place where Don Julián lived and died. Others were propped against fences, tucked into the bushes, or even stuck on stakes. The sheer number was just mind-boggling, like an army of decaying guards. The wind would often make them sway, giving this creepy sense of movement, their plastic limbs creaking, their lifeless eyes seeming to blink or follow you. The air was described as thick with this unsettling quiet, only broken by rustling leaves or a distant bird, a silence that just made the dolls feel even creepier. Inside Don Julián's hut, visitors could apparently see some of his most important dolls, like the supposed first doll and his favorite, Agustina. A small makeshift museum had newspaper clippings and articles, giving bits and pieces of the island's history and its creator. After Don Julián died in 2001, his family, especially his nephew Anastasio Santana, kept the island going, opening it up more officially to visitors and sharing the story. They saw its unique draw and its potential as a tourist spot, becoming the new guardians of this weird legacy. Visitors would often bring their own dolls to add to the collection, a tradition that kept Don Julián's work going and added even more of these eerie figures to the island. Some would even leave offerings, change the dolls' clothes, or treat the island like some kind of strange shrine, looking for blessings or miracles. Getting to the real island usually meant hiring a specific trajinera from a dock like Xochimilco, because not all boat guys would go, or some might even try to take clueless tourists to less impressive copycat doll islands that popped up to cash in on the original's fame. The trip was often said to be about 4 hours round trip, including time on the island. Facilities were basic. There were toilets, but often no lights, so a flashlight was a good idea, especially if you went later in the day. Mosquito repellent was essential, especially in the evening. And since there were no food sellers on the remote island itself, bringing your own water and snacks was a smart move. But visiting the original Island of the Dolls has gotten really uncertain lately. As of early 2025, reports, especially from places like Atlas Obscura, suggest that the original Isla de las Muñecas, Don Julián's island, might be permanently closed to visitors. Why it might be closed isn't always clear, but the implication is huge. Actually walking among Don Julián's original collection might not be possible anymore. This throws a new, tricky wrench into any look at the island. If the main place is off limits, what are tourists actually seeing? Those same sources suggest some boat operators might be taking people to fake islands. Other chinampas dressed up with dolls to look like the original, feeding the constant demand from tourists desperate to see this infamous spot. This brings up a ton of questions. How real are these other places? Are visitors being told they might not be seeing Don Julián Santana Barrera's actual island? The quest to find the real Island of the Dolls today might be less about paddling through canals and more about wading through misinformation and fakes. This possible closure and the appearance of imposter islands really changed the story. Exploring it isn't just about the past anymore, but about the current headaches of trying to preserve, or failing to preserve, such a unique and controversial landmark. It just goes to show how fragile these kinds of sites can be, especially when they come from one person's eccentric vision and not some official plan. The trip now comes with extra uncertainty, a need to do your homework, and maybe a bit of sadness for what might be lost or hidden. The experience of what it's really like to walk among the dolls today, for the original island, might have turned into what it's like to try and fail, or to be unknowingly sent somewhere else. That's a pretty haunting twist in the island's long, strange story. The eerie silence of the dolls might now be joined by the silence of an island that no longer welcomes curious eyes, its secrets clutched even tighter. As we try to navigate the murky waters around the island of the dolls, a few unsettling truths and a whole bunch of lingering questions pop up, painting a picture that's way more complex than just simple ghost stories. The biggest, most immediate unsettling truth is the strong chance that the original island, the actual Chinampa that Don Julián Santana Barrera tended to and filled with dolls, isn't open to the public anymore. If this closure is real and permanent, it's the end of an era for dark tourism in Xochimilco. It means that raw, first-hand experience of facing Don Julián's 50-year obsession in its original powerful setting is now just history, not something most people can experience today. This leads us to the troubling problem of these fake islands, or imposter islands. Clearly, people still want to experience the creepy appeal of the island of the dolls. If shady or just opportunistic Trajanera operators are really taking tourists to imitation spots without telling them, it's a deception that feeds on people's curiosity. It waters down the real story, swapping a genuine, if bizarre, piece of local history for a manufactured experience. How many recent visitors think they've seen the true island when they've actually just seen a copy? That question looms large over the current tourist scene in Xochimilco. It's a sharp reminder that in tourism, especially the dark or legend-based kind, authenticity can be a very fragile thing, easily twisted. The legend of the drowned girl, the absolute foundation of the island's story, is still a huge question mark. Was she real, a tragic girl whose spirit truly haunted Don Julián? Or was she a product of his lonely imagination, a psychological projection, or a story he created to explain his own urges? His family, some stories say, doubted she ever existed. If she wasn't real, then the whole reason for the island, to calm her spirit, changes completely. It becomes less about a haunted man and more about a man haunted by something inside himself. The dolls then switch from being spiritual guardians to being physical representations of one man's inner world, his grief, his fears, or his unique way of expressing himself through art or ritual. This uncertainty is maybe the most unsettling truth of all, because it leaves the real reason behind this incredible 50-year project totally mysterious. Then there's the mystery of Don Julián's own death. In 2001, at age 80 or 86, depending on the source, he was found drowned in the canal. Supposedly, his body was found in the exact same spot where he said he'd found the girl's body all those years ago. This creepy coincidence just fuels the legend, with many believing the girl's spirit, or maybe the combined energy of the dolls, finally got him. His nephew, Anastasio, who was apparently with him, or visited him just before he died, said Don Julián had been acting strangely, even singing passionately, and claiming mermaids in the water were calling to him. Moments later, he supposedly had a heart attack and fell in. Was it a tragic accident, a medical issue in a tragically fitting place? Or was it the final supernatural chapter of the island's story? The official cause might be ordinary, but the stories around his death will always be part of the island's haunting legacy. And what was the real deal with Don Julián's relationship with the dolls? He called them protectors, said they were beautiful. Yet, he often picked the most damaged, most disturbing ones. Did he see beauty in their brokenness? Did their decay reflect something going on inside him? Were they friends in his loneliness, an audience for his thoughts, or connections to a spiritual world only he could see? He lived among them, seemingly fine with their unsettling presence, even letting visitors come see them. This complicated, almost contradictory relationship adds another layer to understanding him. And what about the dolls themselves now, especially if the original island is truly abandoned or not being kept up? After decades exposed to the Xochimilco sun, rain, and humidity, they were already pretty far gone. This natural decay is part of their creepy charm, a constant, slow-motion change. If no one's looking after the island, this process will just speed up. The dolls will keep warping, cracking, and falling apart, slowly going back to the earth and water they came from. There's a sad, kind of beautiful decay to this, but it also means that the physical result of Don Julián's life's work is temporary, fated to disappear. Is anyone trying to preserve this unique, if disturbing, piece of outsider art? Or is it just being left to vanish? Xochimilco's UNESCO World Heritage status protects the Chinampa system, but does that protection cover such an unusual and controversial setup within it? The Island of the Dolls makes you think about some deep stuff: belief, obsession, mental health, and how humans try to find meaning after tragedy or when they're isolated. It also connects to Mexican culture, where death and the supernatural have this unique and very visible role in everyday life, like with Dia de los Muertos. The island became a hotspot for these ideas, a place where visitors could face the macabre, the mysterious, and the very personal world of a man who lived way outside the usual social rules. The questions left hanging are as many as the dolls themselves. What really drove Don Julián for all those years? What's the final word on the original island and whether anyone can visit? And how will the legend of the Isla de las Muñecas keep changing, now that its physical form might be shifting or hidden? The answers might be as hard to pin down as the whispers Don Julián said he heard in the rustling leaves and lapping canal waters. The unsettling truth is, some mysteries are just meant to stay mysteries, their power not in being solved, but in how they keep making us curious and stirring up our deepest fears. The story of the Island of the Dolls is clearly still evolving, with new questions popping up about what's going on with it now. Have any of you tried to visit recently? What was it like? Did you find the original island, or did you see something else? Share your stories and any info you have in the comments. Your first-hand experiences could be incredibly helpful in figuring out the current situation of this legendary place. If you like this deep dive into the unknown and want to help us investigate more of the world's weirdest mysteries and creepiest destinations, please think about subscribing and sharing this video with anyone else who's into the unexplained. Every bit of interaction helps us bring more of these stories out. Maybe hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss our next trip into the shadows. La Isla de las Muñecas, the Island of the Dolls, is so much more than just a pile of decaying toys on a remote bit of land. It's a powerful symbol, a physical embodiment of a story that taps into some of our deepest human fascinations: death, the supernatural, grief, isolation, and the sheer depths of obsession. Whether you take the stories of a drowned girl and angry spirits literally or as a metaphor, the island Don Julián Santana Barrera built over 5 decades is a truly unique and unsettling landmark. Being located in Xochimilco, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that holds onto remnants of ancient Aztec cleverness, makes for a stark contrast. Among the lively trajineras and the historical weight of the Chinampas, the Island of the Dolls popped up as this oddity, a deeply personal and intensely macabre place born from one man's unique vision. It unintentionally became a dark tourism icon, pulling in thousands who wanted that eerie thrill, the draw of the forbidden, and a peek into a story that felt like it was ripped straight from a Gothic novel. Don Julián's own legacy is as complicated as the island he made. Was he a tortured soul, a man consumed by guilt or delusion? Was he some kind of shaman, talking to spirits in his own way? Or was he an outsider artist, building this huge, immersive piece driven by an inner story we can't fully grasp? Maybe he was a bit of all of that. His life, spent in self-chosen exile, devoted to this constantly growing doll collection, really makes you question what's normal and the different ways people deal with trauma, whether it's real or imagined. His death, in the very canal tied to the island's origin story, just solidified his place in folklore, adding one last tragic touch to his tale. The island's cultural importance also comes from how it reflects parts of Mexican culture, where there's this unique, often celebratory, connection with death and the spirit world. The fact that visitors left offerings or new dolls, just like Don Julián did, suggests people intuitively understood the island as a place with strong spiritual energy, however dark it might be. Those recent reports about the original island possibly closing and all these copycat sites popping up add a sad and somewhat worrying chapter to its story. If the real island of the dolls is truly becoming inaccessible or being replaced by commercial knockoffs, it makes you wonder about preservation, authenticity, and the ethics of how we manage such unique, even if disturbing, cultural spots. Is its value in its physical existence, or will its legend keep going and even grow if the original site becomes a true ghost, only reachable through stories and old photos? The truth, as it often is with these lasting mysteries, is probably a mix of fact, folklore, personal psychology, and what we all imagine together. The drowned girl may or may not have been real, but believing in her and what Don Julián did because of it created something undeniably powerful. The dolls, in their silent, decaying watch, still have this weird draw, representing a deep human story of one man's lonely 50-year chat with the unseen. What we're left with is a mystery that just won't quit. The Island of the Dolls is a chilling reminder that the world has places where the line between what we know and what we don't, between the normal and the terrifying, is incredibly thin. It shows how one person's focused will can reshape a bit of the world based on their deepest fears and beliefs. The real story of the Island of the Dolls might ultimately be less about proving ghosts exist, and more about understanding the ghosts that can live inside the human heart, and the amazing, unsettling ways they can show up in the world around us. The island, whether you can visit it or not, will probably keep haunting our collective imagination. Its silence is deep and disturbing as the blank stares of its thousands of decaying residents. The canals of Xochimilco hold many secrets, but maybe none quite as uniquely unsettling as the real story of Don Julián Santana Barrera and his Island of the Dolls. From its tragic or perhaps imagined origins in the 1950s, through decades of obsessive collection, to its current uncertain state as a tourist destination, the island remains a powerful testament to one man's strange and enduring legacy. We've waded through the legends, peeked into historical accounts, and faced the unsettling reality of what it means to try and find a place like this today. The questions may outnumber the answers, and the real truth may remain as elusive as the spirits Don Julián believed he was appeasing. But the eerie fascination of the Island of the Dolls endures, a chilling narrative whispered on the waters of an ancient landscape. What's clear is that this small Chinampa, overrun by its silent, decaying population, has carved out a truly unique and unforgettable spot in the list of the world's weirdest places. Its story is a haunting reminder of the thin line between devotion and obsession, reality and the phantoms of the mind. And as the dolls keep slowly decaying, the mystery only gets deeper, making sure the Island of the Dolls will keep intriguing and disturbing people for generations. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. Until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring the shadows.